Here's what's coming up on today's show.
Because the problem with the 4% rule is that it kind of can overemphasize being conservative.
Yeah.
Like for those couple of percentage of chances that you're going to run out of money. And then you got the people who say, well, let's go ahead and take 6% out. But then you kind of have to know, well, if I'm taking 6% out, I have to know when that's not
When's the
okay.
trade-off?
Yeah,
Yeah.
when is that trade-off? So risk-based guardrails actually tells you when that trade-off happens.
This is the Money Master Podcast from Brindle and Bay Wealth Management with Tori Tenhagen, Connie Davis, and certified financial planner Nick Davis.
Welcome back, everyone. We're so glad that you're here with us. I am Connie, here with Nick and Tori, and we're just excited to be here with you guys and really appreciate you joining us each and every week or as often as you can. And so today we're just going to talk about some warning signs that your retirement plan won't last, which
is everybody's fear, right?
Yeah. You know, warning signs. You're like, oh, flashing yellow light ahead. Beware, cautious. You know, proceed with caution. You know, some of the topics that we'll
What are
talk
going
about
through
today.
people's minds when they think about their money and the future of not working is what? Not going to run out of money.
Money going to last, yeah.
You know, am I going to be able to reach my goals? And
Can I keep my lifestyle?
yeah, those are the big ones.
Yeah.
So we're just going to talk about stuff that we don't like to talk about, you know, too much in person because it hurts people's feelings. No, I don't think it's that
We
rough.
don't want to be too critical, Debbie Downer.
Yeah, but
Not all bad news.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. Sign number one, we've noticed that there's like too many debt repayments. So we'll notice that people are paying back debt, and
I think it's good to talk about good debt versus bad debt, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, people think, oh, well, I don't have credit card debt, but I still owe on my house.
Mm-hmm.
But that's normal, right? Like, shouldn't I still owe on my house? You know, or I'm almost done paying on my house. So,
yeah, people we blur the lines, right? And it's a weird phenomenon, but we notice that people, like, for some reason, when they get within like 5 years of retirement, sometimes they tend to stack up some more debt, like rack up high interest debt. And I don't know like what the reasoning is for that, but maybe it's that
I think it's probably a fear of like, I'm about to not have a paycheck.
Yeah,
Let's get
that's
this
what
done
I'm
now before I
thinking.
retire.
Yeah. So, you know, obviously, you know, the one thing that we're looking for as financial planners is this a habit? You know, one of my friends years ago was a mortgage person, and he said that people would refinance their mortgages and take out HELOC loans to pay off higher interest rates. And hey, that seems really virtuous, but then they kept doing it because they had a behavior, right? So I guess the big question would be is it a behavior? Is it good debt versus bad debt? Bad debt obviously being consumer debt, high interest debt. You know, no, it's a gut punch. You know, the interest rates are a gut punch right now for sure, especially even on new mortgages, but especially on
credit
private
cards.
loans,
Yeah.
boats, anything other than like a brand new car. Maybe you can get a lower interest rate, but you just really have to watch out for these things and ask, is it a recurring bad behavior? My daughter had a school loan, and, you know, me not thinking ahead advised her just go ahead and get the adjustable rate.
It's when interest rates were low.
Yeah. And, you know, it just blew out of control. And so she had to take action. And so, you know, if you're not paying attention to it, we see people flipping credit cards at those 0% interest rates all the time. That thing goes sideways fast when you have more than 50% of your credit amount available that you leave on a revolving balance. So it's like, it was a good idea until you realize that you're starting to kill your score, and eventually those cards go away and people kind of get hit. So you really got to pay attention to that, especially as you get close to retirement. Not all debt is bad debt, like Connie said. I think
Well,
you know,
and you
having
know,
a house is okay.
And I just thought about something, you know, you were talking about habits, you know, is this a reoccurring habit? You know, now if you've been on Facebook or anywhere that you like purchase sites, it has the option to pay in installments.
Yeah, I hate
which
that.
Everywhere.
is so weird.
I hate
For a
that.
pair of tennis shoes. It's like,
Exactly.
would you like $30 payments a month for, yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's
It's
a
the-
mentality that's
It's
the
the
red
downfall.
flag there.
It'll be a downfall of our society, letting young people do that.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter has a friend who does that, and I'm just like, you watch, like that is indicative of something bad coming down the road. It's just not good behavior. You know, you should never finance your luxuries. You know, you should pay cash for your luxuries unless you have some math reason, like you finance a boat at 1.9% because you're getting 5% interest on your CDs or something like that. But other than that, so what's an actionable step here? You know, we don't want to belabor this really negative debt repayment thing if you're not a person who has a debt problem and you want to know what the other couple of signs are. So the actionable step is, I think you could go to dinkytown.net. If you've ever heard of Dinkytown, it's kind of funny.
It's a great website, but
Sounds
it has
like
a crazy name.
Yeah, it sounds like a song. What take me to Dinkytown? I don't know that song. Like, what? I'm trying to think of the 80s song. Anyway,
I don't know.
yeah, I'm not very good at that at improvising here. So I would say that if you go to dinkytown.net and you look up the snowball elimination calculator, you just put yourself in that debt elimination. The cool thing about doing that is if you put yourself on a debt elimination program, those extra dollars are showing you that you have the ability to live within your means. And then once you get it paid off, then you've got that extra cash flow as well. So that can actually be a negative that turns into a positive if you get your stuff together.
It's reframing the mentality. We've had people ask us that, like, I'm going to buy my cars outright, but shouldn't I always kind of be like mentally saving for the next car I need to buy? Or, I'm not going to have a car payment, but shouldn't I mentally keep that car payment there so I can buy the next car? So it's
Right.
reframing.
Yeah, because
how
if
you're
they have
gonna
that
spend
extra
dollars.
cash and not thinking about that they're going to have to spend that, they might go ahead and allocate it towards something else.
And we tell people that if there's money left in the plan, if it's not planned for, human behavior is you're going to find a way to spend it.
Yeah.
And so if you're not planning for it, it'll get spent.
It's going to go bye-bye. It's human behavior. Sign number 2, and this is a big one, and that is aggressive withdrawal strategies.
So aggressive withdrawal strategies, you're talking about from your IRAs and your retirement accounts, right?
Yeah. So what is a withdrawal strategy, right? That's probably a question that we should answer. And that is just, the percentage that you're taking money out plays into that, and also maybe the methodology by which you do it. But let's just talk about the percentage. High withdrawal percentages, it's
Impact to plan.
Yeah, it's
I
dangerous.
saw it with clients the other day. We were testing some different things and things they wanted to do. One of those being a big house remodel that they have the funds for, but doing it like all in one year, the plan success went down. The Monte Carlo went, because it saw really, really high withdrawal. Like it affected the plan.
Yeah.
That probably still going to be okay because it was a one-time thing. Like it was planned for, but they were like, why did it go down so much? And I'm saying that those withdrawal strategies really do impact the plan.
So withdrawal percentage is important because we want to have a sustainable rate. And the question that people have asked, academics have asked many times is, what is the highest withdrawal rate I can get away with and still make my money last? And that comes down to typically, the 4% rule you've heard of. 4% typically is that number. If you don't have at least 60% stocks and equities in your portfolio, that number goes below 4% into the 3s. Some people would argue that number could be higher and that it's too low. But the idea here is that, I'm not trying to beat up Dave Ramsey, but it's one of the things. And listen, I really respect that Dave Ramsey has gotten a lot of people out of debt. But it's really crazy how he kind of went on a rampage about 6 months ago. And it turns out he's been doing this for 10 years. I just didn't know it. But 6 months ago, there was a bunch of YouTube videos about Dave Ramsey's really ranting about 8 to 10% withdrawal percentages, and how crazy stupid it was for advisors to actually say 4 and 5%. And it just baffles my mind because there's not a single academic that, that'll actually say that that's okay. And so that's dangerous, right? So we want to pay attention to that. One of the things you can notice is that if you look at your plan, and this is the thing that we find, is that if a person starts out in retirement and they've got a high withdrawal amount and they're happy with that, like, I like this. But if it represents like 6 or 7 or 8% of their total money that they have every year, you have to kind of warn them that that's okay for now, but you're going to, once Social Security kicks in, you're going to be taking less from your portfolio, or once that thing is paid off, you're going to be taking less from your portfolio, and make sure that they're okay with that. Because if they're not okay with that, maybe they can sustain an 8% withdrawal rate because someday they're going to be at a 3.2% withdrawal rate based on their goals. It's just that they have to be prepared for that. So that's the percentage side. But then you also have the other side of it, which is the strategy, right? The strategy is, well, do I take the same amount out every year? Do I adjust it for inflation? Do I adjust it based on the stock market? Like, what is my methodology?
Yeah. What's your game plan?
Yeah. And so there's lots of different strategies. It can be very confusing. You probably have heard of things like, bucket strategy, or the 4% rule would be a strategy. Okay. That's also similar to the inflation adjusted strategy, which is to just take your amount out take some percentage out and then take an inflation adjusted increase every year. But you have to kind of know what that beginning percentage is to be safe, right? Which kind of brings you straight back to this idea of the safe withdrawal percentage. There's other strategies as well. One called the spending smile, spending stages, which kind of matches the lifestyle spending, meaning this particular strategy says, well, I'm going to spend more when I'm younger in retirement. And then as I get older in retirement, I'm going to kind of get into those slow go years, which we don't like to hear that word slow go, but it happens. And then towards the end of life, I'm going to be spending more money. So that's a strategy there. And a lot of times that can be a really good strategy because it does match what people really
Behavior.
do. Yes. But there's another withdrawal strategy that we talk about, and I'm very, very in love with it. I love the guardrails strategy, but not just any guardrail strategy, but it's the risk-based guardrails. And I've written a paper on it. I've promoted it a lot on our YouTube channel. I talk about it. And in fact, in the show notes, we'll probably put a link in case you want to download a paper called Modern Guardrails. But to me, it's really not an easy thing to say like, hey, you just take 4%. But it really is using a lot of sophistication and saying when it's okay to spend more, because the problem with the 4% rule is that it kind of can overemphasize being conservative.
Yeah.
Like for those couple of percentage of chances that you're going to run out of money. And then you got the people who say, well, let's go ahead and take 6% out. But then you kind of have to know, well, if I'm taking 6% out, I have to know when that's not
When's the
okay.
trade-off?
Yeah,
Yeah.
when is that trade-off? So risk-based guardrails actually tells you when that trade-off happens. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure you download that paper. We'll put it in the show notes. So what's an actionable step here? If this is a concern you have, well, I would definitely avoid taking the advice of taking 8% out per year forever.
Blindly.
Blindly?
Yeah. Don't just guess a percentage and go.
Yeah. Are you ready to take the next step in creating your own next chapter? Are you looking for calmness and clarity around your retirement future? We'd love to visit with you about that. It all starts with a 15-minute phone call, and you can get that set up on your phone or computer right now by going to brindleandbay.com, which is our website, and you would click on the button that says Let's Talk. Again, go to brindleandbay.com, click on the Let's Talk button, and let's get the conversation started. All right, sign number 3 is poor portfolio allocation. So what does it mean to have poor portfolio allocation?
I'm retired and I'm scared I'm going to run out, so I'm just going to be super conservative and stay in cash and panic. And I mean, that's the fear, right? That's the mentality of I can't lose money in the stock market. I can't make any more money. This is what I have. And so they lean
that's
on
one
the
example.
conservative side.
That's one example, right? They're too conservative. Or another common example is because of our 401ks and the funds that we have, we're overly in communications and technology, and
We're not balanced across. We're not diversified.
right. And the thing is that when things go really, really high, that's where there also tends to be a return to the mean, to the average. And so the challenge with diversification, and allocation is we tend as people to look at what has done well in recent past. And if you read enough books on investing, you find that that's almost always a trap. What has done well in recent past is not what is going to do well in the future necessarily. And so we have to be careful of that. For a great example is small cap value was known to do very, very well for a very, very long time. People still believe that it's going to do well over time. But for the past 10 plus years, small cap value didn't do well. And if you go back to the 10-year period before that, small cap value actually saved the day when large cap growth did really, really horrible during what's known as the lost decade. And the same thing's happening with international right now. International is underperforming U.S. by a lot. And the reason for that is technology is, we're dominating in technology. And when that changes, international may come to save the day again, which, what is it? It's a diversifier, right? Meaning international is not great, right? People tell me they don't want to have it in their portfolio, but it's a diversifier. And so if you have a 401k and you have funds, you don't really know what you have, because a lot of times it just says you're in the
Target date fund
the target date
2050.
fund, or you're in the growth fund, or you're in the balance fund. You have no clue what you really have. But if you were to analyze your allocation using some tools like Morningstar tools, we use one called Quanti. If you have an advisor just tear apart your portfolio and kind of show you what's in there, you'll find that maybe if you have multiple accounts, there's overlap, and there's a lot of similarities between all of your accounts, which, means that, maybe you're not as diversified as you think. And so you really want to pay attention. As Tori said in the beginning, one of those behaviors of bad allocation is just going too conservative. And that is a problem because of inflation. Okay.
So if somebody is listening and they're like, oh gosh, I don't know if I have a poor allocation, what's the easiest simple step? You said they can run something on their own?
Well, they could if they were to look at the stuff that they have inside their funds. It's difficult to know inside of a 401k. Trust me, we've set up our own 401k here at Brindle and Bay for ourselves. And it's not easy to know what's inside of funds. You have to click and click and click deeper and deeper. But for the most part, in IRAs, it's a lot easier. But the easy answer is you use a tool like Morningstar, or you use a tool like Quanti. And these are usually paid tools. There's probably maybe some free allocation tools out there. The problem is that if you're only using one custodian to do, like if you get a free tool at a custodian, are they including all of your other accounts that are not there, right? When you're trying to analyze, and is it really giving you the information that you need? And then even if you do have the information that you need, are you the person to actually help to make sure that you have that proper allocation? I mean, unless you sit and read 400 pages of Stocks for the Long Run, which is a 50-year-old book, which is a fantastic book that I'm rereading again this year.
I know you're reading, but most of us probably would not.
Well, they redid it for the sixth, the sixth time. The two greatest books on investing that I think that are super helpful for the nerds out there would be Stocks for the Long Run by Jeremy Siegel. I probably mispronounced his name. And then one of his colleagues, actually, A Random Walk Down Wall Street. Okay. And the principle about that idea of the random walk down Wall Street is that the stock market is a random walk in the short term.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Part of that poor portfolio allocation trap is looking at things in 1 year. How to do this year? Yeah. That's another trap. If I got to move, I got to do something. I didn't do great this year. You can't look at stuff in that short term, and that's another problem.
That is so right. So the random walk happens. There's nobody who can change that. But over time, it smooths out and becomes a little bit more, I hate to say the word predictable, but a little bit more understandable in terms of behavior, and there is a track record, a decent track record of what U.S. companies have done over the past 100 years. So, those two books are great. Diversification, allocation, proper allocation matters. It also matters because, other reasons, like, does your taxable account have more dividends in it and your IRA have less dividends in it? It probably should be reversed. Those dividends help from a tax perspective, but they also help from an allocation perspective because dividends have historically outpaced inflation by a lot. And so, that all plays into knowing kind of what you have inside of your portfolio. So, what are some actionable steps here? Well, you kind of want to make sure that you understand what kind of allocation methodology you're using, whether it's you or your advisor.
And some people are surprised by that. Like people who come to us and bring us their 401k statement, they're like, whoa, I didn't know that's how I was even at, I'm pretty aggressive and I didn't realize I was that aggressive. That kind of scares me, or, whatever, because they don't know. Like you said, it's really hard to be able to tell.
Right.
In there.
And you can actually have more stocks and be less aggressive or more aggressive because you don't know how well diversified those sectors are, according to, different seasons, like cyclical seasons and things like that. So anyway, actionable steps would be to know that, make sure you regularly rebalance your portfolio, which also keeps your allocation in check. Sign number 4, no emergency funding. We see people that kind of head into retirement. They don't really have a plan for having their emergency funding set up. And it kind of puts handcuffs on them a little bit and puts them a little bit of a danger. So, you want to have that there. We had somebody recently who had properly set up her emergency savings. She's transitioning into retirement. She wanted to purchase her ideal home. She found a perfect right-sized home for retirement across town, and she was able to quickly access money she needed to actually compete against somebody else and get access to those accounts. I mean, not to those accounts, to
Those
purchase
funds,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, to those funds. So it can help you for various things like avoiding an emergency or taking advantage of an opportunity. But you want to definitely make sure you have your emergency savings set aside. You want to make sure that, some practical examples of that would be to have 6 months of portfolio withdrawals in an FDIC insured account. We just like to do 6 months of portfolio withdrawals.
So what are you going to withdraw for the year, and what's half of that?
Yeah.
And save that separate.
And if you're not there, if you're not retired and you're not set to have that, put yourself on a payment schedule to get yourself to that. Okay? Because if you show up at retirement and you have no cash, it's all in your 401k, it's a little bit painful when it comes to the tax bill, when you're having to do that. All right. The 5th step, ignoring healthcare costs.
Because nobody wants to talk about them. They're not fun.
They're
That topic as a
unpredictable.
whole is not fun.
Yeah. I mean, well, there's the unknown. It feels like it's pointless to plan for healthcare because we don't know what our future costs are going to be. Right. But let's simplify it a little bit. Okay. And I think just break it down into 3 areas and it can be a lot easier. And that is, the first area would be before you retire. If you retire before you're 65. So what is that healthcare going to look like? And then there's going to be the age 65 throughout retirement, my normal healthcare needs, which would be my Medicare costs, out-of-pocket costs. And then the third area would be custodial care, otherwise known as long-term care, which Medicare does not cover. We should say that every time we can because so many Americans do not know that Medicare is not going to cover custodial care. Okay, but those 3 areas, in a way of simplifying that when it comes to age 65, because there's a lot of fear around, well, how am I going to know I'm going to be okay with my health care? And, T. Rowe Price just recently did a study and said, here's how much you need in premiums per person if you want to have a 90% chance of having your needs met. And here's another number for 75%, 75th percentile of your needs for your monthly premium. And I don't have it. I was going to have it sitting in front of me. We could probably pull it up really quick what that number is, but it's somewhere around $3,000 or $4,000 a year. Maybe we can pull it up while we're sitting here. And then there's the out-of-pocket cost. So that's the one that you can also have a budget for. And T. Rowe Price in their study actually showed you this is how much money you can have for your out-of-pocket costs. And then if you have both those numbers, first of all, the premium is predictable. So you and your spouse can have that in your plan, and that's nice. And then you can have that out-of-pocket inside your plan as well so that you know that you have it. So if you do that, that's putting you, in the right position. Like it's putting you in the right direction, right? But now what could go wrong? What could go wrong is long-term care, right? The custodial care. So that has to also be, figured for. I'm looking at a graphic right now from 2022, and the out-of-pocket, if you want to be in the 75th percentile, it's $2,500 a year per person. Out of pocket. The premium in the 75th percentile is $3,100. So $3,100 plus $2,500 a year, which totals. They've got a total here of $5,700. So $5,700. It's actually they're $100 off from the 2 different graphs, so they combined it in one. So let's just go. I'm just going to go off the total. So the 75th percentile is $5,700 a year per person, and that covers Medicare steady premium plus about $2,500 a year for out-of-pocket costs. That's the 75th percentile. Now, if you want to be in the 90th percentile, that total number bumps up to $8,300 a year. That's per person. Mm-hmm. So hypothetically speaking, 2 people in the 75th percentile would need $5,700 times 2. So that begs the question, well, what happens if do I set that money aside? Because that's a question that as a young financial planner I used to ask. Should we set that money aside so it's there for healthcare? Tori, when you're asked that question, what do you tell them? I'm quizzing you now.
So we set it aside?
Yeah.
We plan for the costs each year in retirement, and those get inflated and adjusted for healthcare assumptions, right? We're going to assume. But long-term care costs, yes, we earmark some of that to set aside and plan for because you don't know. You don't know for sure, and you'd rather make sure that you're preparing for a little bit of it to be covered if needed.
Yeah. So people want to know, should I take that out of my investment so it's there for my health care. And what Tori just said, in case you didn't catch that, is we sprinkle it in
Right.
throughout all the years. So it's still a part of your allocation. It just doesn't make sense to take it out and put it in CDs, because now you've got money producing less of a targeted return.
Right.
So it needs to be budgeted for, like she said, in your plan. I wouldn't necessarily set it apart into
Yeah,
a
you don't
separate
want to just
account.
stunt its growth because you're trying to earmark it. You just want it to continue, but be planned for.
Yep, that's a question people ask, should they do that? So, don't ignore the healthcare costs. When it comes to extended healthcare, like she just mentioned, it's very much more of a difficult conversation. There's multiple ways of tackling that, but you should not leave that out of the conversation.
Right.
Because
there's some people want the long-term care insurance. Some people want to self-insure. So there's many ways to go about it.
Yeah.
But you want to make sure you know which way you're going to go about it.
And I think
You're
it's very
not guessing.
personalized, because most people handle it this way. I'm not going to get into it in this episode, but then some people would be better off handling it that way. And I could count 4 or 5 different ways of handling or paying for your extended healthcare needs. So what are some takeaways here? What can we, what are some actionable steps we can do? Well, if you're not retired yet and you're not 65, you can contribute to an HSA, right? That's beneficial. If you've got an HSA, you definitely make sure you're budgeting for ongoing Medicare premiums and out-of-pocket costs. Make sure that those are in your plan, whether you're doing a spreadsheet yourself or you have a financial plan with a planner. Make sure that those are included in your costs. And, don't ignore the long-term healthcare conversation. Got to talk about that. Maybe we'll do another episode on what those potential possibilities would be, for how to mitigate that risk. People tend to click off of those episodes because they don't like to talk about insurance.
I was going to say, when we got to the healthcare section, I said, this section nobody wants to talk about. But if you don't talk about the long-term care, the Medicare costs, all that, you're missing a huge part of the financial plan.
Yeah. So include it in your retirement budget so that you don't have a drowning retirement plan.
Well, thanks for joining us today. We touched on 5 warning signs that your retirement plan is at risk. Maybe some of these, touched a nerve with you today. Maybe you listen to this and you're like, oh man, hey, I'm great. I've planned for all those things. I'm doing all the right things. Congratulations. Either way, we appreciate you joining us today. If you would like to see the way that we help create calmness and clarity during retirement, take a look at us at brindleandbay.com. And remember to leave a comment, and share the podcast with a friend. See you next time.
Hey there. Quick break to let you know that each week I send out an email. It's called Nick's Memo. Super creative name, I know. But this isn't your normal market commentary. It's my thoughts to help you make sense of what's going on in the financial world. So for example, I'll give you a few of the last week's headlines. One of them was called Life Cycle of Bull Markets. And I talk about the 4 phases of bull markets and how you can tell which phase that we're in. Or another topic the week before that was called Comfort is a Moving Target. And I talked about the crises that we hear about, that we see, that we genuinely face all the time. It is disturbing, but how to put that into perspective and be okay regardless of what we're hearing and seeing. And one more topic for you, a couple weeks before that, is what does it take to feel wealthy? And that was based on an interesting study about how much money people have, and yet they still feel they don't feel wealthy. So what does it take to feel wealthy? So if you're interested in getting that every Friday, then all you have to do is text us the word MEMO. That's MEMO. And you're going to text it to our business line at 214-988-9178. That's 214-988-9178. And we'll get you subscribed to the weekly memo.
Nick Davis is an investment advisor representative of Brindle and Bay Financial Advisors, a registered investment advisor. The show is for informational purposes only. Any exposure to ideas and financial vehicles discussed should not be considered financial advice or a recommendation to buy or sell a financial vehicle. You should consult a qualified financial, tax, or legal professional before taking any action. This program is not endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency. Annuity guarantees rely solely on the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing company. Insurance licensed in Texas, number 1188639. Brindle and Bay Wealth Management is affiliated with Brindle and Bay Financial Advisors.